All right, let's get right into it. Have you ever really stopped to think about why we have all these rules? Why we have governments and laws, and why we generally agree to follow them? I mean, why do we stop at red lights at 3 a.m. when no one's around? Well, it turns out there's a huge, fascinating idea that tries to answer exactly that, and it's called the social contract theory. So that's really the core question, isn't it? Why on earth would any of us, as free people, willingly agree to give up some of that freedom to be told what to do by a government? It kind of goes against our instincts. But this theory says, hold on, it's not that simple. It suggests that at some point, we all basically made a deal, a kind of collective bargain for something we wanted even more than total freedom. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll tackle why we'd even want a government. Then we're going to take a trip back in time to imagine life in the wild before all the rules. After that, we'll look at the actual deal that was made, pit the three heavyweights of this theory, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, against each other, and finally, we'll ask the big question, does this idea even hold up today? Right, so where did the state even come from? This question has kept philosophers busy for, well, forever. Was it handed down from God? Did the strongest person just take over? Social contract theory comes along and offers a totally different take. It says the state wasn't an accident or an act of force. It was a choice. The whole theory boils down to this. The government exists because we, the people, agreed to create it. We made a contract. Now, there are three names you've just got to know when you talk about this: Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And while they all agreed a deal was made, oh man, did they have completely different ideas about why we made it and what that deal looked like. Okay, so to really get why anyone would sign this contract, we have to imagine what life was like before it. All three of our philosophers started with this hypothetical scenario, this blank slate, which they called the state of nature. You can think of it as like humanity's factory default setting, before any software updates. And this is where their paths just completely split. For Thomas Hobbes, the state of nature was an absolute nightmare, a total free-for-all. He thought people were naturally selfish, so life was just a constant war of all against all. Basically, might mix right. John Locke, though, he was way more chill about it. He imagined a state of nature that was actually pretty peaceful, guided by natural law and reason. The problem for him wasn't total chaos, it was just, well, a few key inconveniences. And you really have to feel the desperation in Hobbes's view. He wrote that life in this state was, and this is a famous quote, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. I mean, just let that sink in. Who would want to live like that? People were just fed up with the constant fear, and they were desperate for a way out. And then there's Rousseau. He just comes in and flips the whole table over. He actually thought the state of nature started out as a peaceful paradise. He argued that everything was great until one single, terrible invention came along and ruined it all, the idea of private property. The second someone fenced off a piece of land and said, "This is mine," boom, hello jealousy, inequality, and conflict. So you've got these different starting points, right? You're either trying to escape a brutal war, fix some annoying problems, or maybe undo the corruption that came with greed. Whatever the reason, humanity apparently decided it was time to make a deal. It was time to form a society, to create a government, to sign on the dotted line of a social contract. For Hobbes, the deal had to be drastic. He said that to escape that nasty, brutish life, everyone had to agree to give up all of their rights to one all-powerful ruler, who he called the Leviathan. In exchange for this total surrender, the Leviathan would provide what everyone craved most: safety and order. It's a straight-up trade. You give me all your liberty, I'll let you live. Locke's version of the deal was way more reasonable. Remember those inconveniences he mentioned? What he meant was there was no legislature to make fair laws, no executive to enforce them, and no neutral judges to settle fights. So people got together and created a government for a very specific purpose: to protect the natural rights they already had: life, liberty, and property. Here, the government is an employee of the people, not the other way around. Now, Rousseau's idea is probably the trickiest, and it all comes down to this concept he called the general will. And listen, this is really important. The general will isn't just what most people want, like in a poll. It's the deeper collective will of the entire community, always focused on what's best for everyone as a whole. It's the ultimate expression of we over me. So in Rousseau's contract, every single person agrees to put themselves under the direction of this general will. What they get in return is pretty profound. They trade their individual, selfish desires, the ones that came from private property, for a new, more meaningful kind of freedom, the freedom that comes from being part of a community that truly looks out for the common good.
Okay, I know, that was a lot to take in. So let's pause for a second and put all of this together. Let's do a direct, side-by-side comparison of these three philosophical giants. It'll make everything crystal clear.
This chart just lays it all out perfectly. Look at human nature. You go from Hobbes thinking we're selfish to Locke seeing us as rational to Rousseau believing we're born good but get corrupted. That directly shapes the state of nature. A brutal war for Hobbes, a pretty decent place with some issues for Locke, and a lost paradise for Rousseau. And that leads to the contract. For Hobbes, you surrender everything for safety. For Locke, you protect the rights you already have. And for Rousseau, you submit to the collective to achieve a higher freedom. So cool to see it all lined up like that. So this theory was obviously a game changer. It totally reshaped how we talk about politics and power. But is it actually right? I mean, did any of this really happen? Let's dive into the legacy of the theory and some of the biggest knocks against it. First, you can't deny its influence. Social contract theory was absolutely revolutionary. It gave us the vocabulary for ideas we kind of take for granted now, like popular sovereignty, the idea that power comes from the people, and individual rights that a government can't just trample on. Its fingerprints are all over things like the Declaration of Independence and constitutions all around the world.
But, and this is a big but, it's got some serious weak spots. For starters, critics say, show me the proof. There's zero historical evidence that any society was ever actually formed by a literal contract. It's a thought experiment. And that's a problem, right? The fact that its own biggest fans couldn't even agree on the basic terms of the deal is also a bit of a red flag. A lot of people argue that the state is more like a plant that grew slowly over time. It evolved. It wasn't just built in a day. And the theory is super vague on the details, like who actually got to sign this contract? Was everyone included? And finally, it kind of ignores the most basic human unit, the family. Maybe society's built on relationships, not just rational deals. So where does that leave us? Here's the key takeaway. Maybe we should stop thinking of social contract theory as a history lesson. It's not about an event that actually happened. Its real power is as a tool, a lens that helps us think critically about the relationship between us and our government. It forces us to ask the really important questions. What's the government for? What do we owe it? And more importantly, what does it owe us? And that really brings it right back to us, here and now, because you could argue that this contract isn't some ancient, dusty document. It's a living, breathing agreement that we are constantly rewriting with every law we pass, every protest we hold, and every election we vote in. So that leaves me with one final question for you. If you could add one new rule, one new clause to our social contract today, what would it be? Definitely something to think about.